Let me introduce this first session that we have on online public records portals. This is an area that's of interest to NFOIC and to our coalitions as well. One of the ways that we work to help initiate these reforms at the legislative and the executive branch levels is to be able to bring evidence to these public officials about why they need to be making some of these changes. As you all know that work in your states, public relations campaigns and shaming people for what they do doesn't seem to have a big effect. But if we can provide some more research and evidence into these areas of how it makes economic sense for these public institutions to change the ways that they're doing some things, then hopefully that moves this needle forward for us as well. And looking at one of the most fundamental roles of freedom of information is making those public records requests for public records. And if anyone who has conducted an audit in their state to try to track the practices around something like this has seen how disjointed this is being done. We did this in Florida, we've seen it in Illinois, and Tennessee did the same thing, looking at these different agencies in terms of trying to collect something and make sense out of some consistencies out there, and there's a real lack of consistencies going on there. So, enter technology, right? There's an app for that. Actually not an app, but there's some technology solutions out there to do this. Online public records request portals are being rolled out in more agencies at the state and local level to handle this task. The benefit here, like I mentioned before, you have now a technology that can record the requests that are being made, to track those requests and to compile that information and actually output what's going on, time to respond to these as well. But we've heard from our coalition directors, there's some mixed feelings out there of this type of technology being used in their states. We have both supporters and detractors among our group here as well. So we have this panel here today that Adam Marshall is going to moderate, where we're going to shed some more light on this conversation. And one of our papers that our presenter Alexa that has a paper on this, looked into this further, that's one of the papers that are going to be presented here at the summit, and we're going to have these available online so you'll be able to read them as well. But let's hear from them to share some more light on this particular topic. Now, many of you all know Adam Marshall. He is a familiar face. He's presented at some of our past FOI summits there as well, and you can read his bio in the program there as we have on everybody else. But I just want to thank Adam and RCFP for the support that they've given to us and participating in this here as well. So thank you, Adam, for being here. And I know you're going to introduce your panel.
Thanks, Dan. Yep, okay, mic is on, excellent. Good morning, everyone. I am Adam Marshall. I'm with the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press. Next to me, we have Alexa Capeloto, who is an associate professor at the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Next to her, we have Will Repole, who is the COO and co-founder of WebQA, one of the major software companies that creates public records portals for governments around the country. And then next to Will, we have Jerry Carter-Lawson, who's the Open Records Manager for the city of Dallas, where we all are today. She's been with the city in one way or another since '95, I believe. So what we're going to do, kind of keep things lively this morning, is we're going to give each of our panelists a few minutes to present. I'm then going to vigorously cross-examine them. No, I'm just going to ask them some questions. And then we're going to open it up to you all to hear your experiences, your thoughts, your questions. But I'd like to start off with just a really brief experience of my own, which is last year I was reviewing one of the appendices to the 1974 FOIA source book, like you do in your spare time. I was actually reviewing it because I was writing a chapter about the federal FOIA and where we are today, and are things better or worse than they were 50 years ago. And I noticed in the appendices that Congress was also really interested in whether FOIA was doing better or worse than in 1974 than when FOIA was first enacted. And so the Library of Congress actually did a survey. They went out to all the federal government agencies and they said, give us all of your data. We need to figure out, is FOIA working, is FOIA not working? And the Library of Congress found it really frustrating. They couldn't really get good answers from a lot of agencies. They did get some data, but it was a huge process for them to try to tabulate all of these. How many requests were coming in, what exemptions were being cited, were requesters satisfied or dissatisfied. And so I was really struck by the amount of work that Congress had done there. And for the purposes of the paper that I was writing, I wanted to know, well, how are things today? Are things better or worse than it was in '74? And so I went to FOIA.gov, and there's this great portal where it has all the numbers and data, and I was able to figure out in about 3 minutes whether agencies were being more open today than 1974. So that was it's a really incredible, I think, move that we've had in the last 50 years at the federal level. Of course, things are not perfect. I don't think anyone would agree with everything that's going on. But nonetheless, the data allows us to see the way that things are shifting, right? For everyone, government entities, requesters, academics, data is a really important tool. We don't know whether problems exist or how to address them unless we know what's going on. Portals are certainly one way to do that, right? Portals do allow for automated data collection. Electronic public records portals also offer additional possibilities. They can make it easier for the public to request government records or to view records that others have already requested. They can also make it easier for the government to manage and respond to requests. But there are frustrations, right? Anyone who's used FOIA online or the new FOIA.gov at the federal level, obviously those are not perfect. There are also issues with interfacing with existing tools that public records advocates have created, like Muckrock. Are these records portals going to have APIs that interface with the public? Are they going to still accept requests via email? Things that journalists really like. So we're going to talk all about that today with our panelists and with you. But I'm going to first turn it over to Alexa and have her spoil the results of her paper, which is excellent, and you all should read it. But Alexa, can you give us a little bit of the lay of the land in terms of public records portals, where we are, and some of the results of your research?
Sure. How's this? Can you hear me? All right, just give me a signal if it's hard to hear. Hi, I'm Alexa. It's nice to be here. I'm really, really excited to be here. So yes, I am here because I actually turned in one of the papers for the competition. This is my paper about the effects of these portals, at least from the perspective of agencies, from government. Can't you hear me? Is this better? Okay. So I turned in this paper, and then I looked on the website to see the schedule for the summit, and the first session is about these portals. And I thought, that's amazing. I thought I was the only one actually taking a look at this. So I turned in the paper and then thought, well, I'd like to be part of this panel talking about this topic. My paper in particular looks at the effects and efficacy of these portals from the agency perspective. So I look at it in terms of the process level, how it's actually working in a practical way for these agencies. Of course, the public information officers, clerks, they are the people who are most often working with these portals. And then also at the broader level of how it might be impacting the relationship between citizen and government, because that is how these portals have been marketed, Next Request in particular, as something that through transparency, increased transparency, can improve the level of trust and empathy between citizen and institution. So for this work, I surveyed a cross-section of public agencies. It went out to a lot, and of course, the response rate is always a small fraction, but I had about 130 responses, and then almost half of them reported having these portals. And most of the agencies that said they didn't get very, very few requests. So if you don't get many, then you probably don't really need a tracking system. You don't need to spend the money for that. So these tend to be larger agencies, or at least agencies that get higher volumes of requests, around 30 to 60 per month. And of course, some jurisdictions get many, many more. Okay, I'm going to speak. My dress wouldn't allow the microphone, so I have this here. So anyway, I surveyed these agencies about how the portals were working for them. This is just a snapshot, a visual of these portals. These are the two most common among survey respondents, and really nationwide, these are two of the most prominent providers of these portals, and Will, of course, is here representing GovQA. Next Request is the other. Next Request is newer. It launched in 2015, but it has amassed a pretty sizable client list in those years. GovQA has been doing this much longer. And these are just two examples, one for each company, of what the interface looks like. Perhaps it's familiar to some of you already. But this is what a user would see on the web when they try to make a public records request. So the Next Request interface, you can see this is for San Francisco. And it might be kind of hard to see, but along the top, you can click on Make Request. You can click on All Requests, because San Francisco made the choice to list all of the requests publicly. And then you can click on Documents, and you can actually access all the responsive records that have been released to other requesters. Jurisdictions have a choice whether they want to do that or not, and in fact, most of the respondents to my survey opted not to provide an archive of responsive documents. GovQA, similar, you can submit a request, and then you can actually have it, they have a separate one for Dallas for police records, which tend to be the most requested records, right? So, here are my results. Overwhelmingly, agencies reported being very satisfied with these portals. 91% were extremely or somewhat satisfied with how they are working for their agencies. And you'll notice that there's no red or gray. It was pretty overwhelmingly positive. And there were some trends in terms of the reasoning. Number one, most frequently mentioned by far, was the centralization and consolidation of management. So, we have to remember that for requesters, at least journalists, which I was, this is kind of almost a poetic thing for me to access government records. It's part of the foundation of our democracy. For agencies, especially the people working hands-on with these processes, it's not so poetic. It's really a government function that they have to perform as part of their job. And so for them, the best part of these portals are the fact that across departments you have a centralized tracking system. So it's the consolidation, it's the tracking itself. These portals, they track every step, they provide audit trails, they offer a communications tool so that the agencies can be communicating within themselves and with the requester. And then the third most common reason given for the effectiveness of the portals is the ease of use for requesters. But this is the order in which the benefits were described. I asked how the portals have affected the internal process of managing the records process, the PRR process. And you can see also this was quite popular. So we have 89% saying that it has vastly or somewhat improved the internal process, and for the reasons basically already mentioned. And then I asked how it's affected the external process of working with requesters. And so this also was kind of a popular answer for positive results. So in this case, slightly less, but still overwhelmingly a positive impact on the external process, primarily because of the transparency. The requester is told right away which agency staffer is managing their request. They receive communications through the portal. They are given the responsive documents through the portal. And in some cases, you can imagine that requesters file a request and almost forget about it or move on, and then they actually are given communications, reminders, oh, your documents have been given to you, or an extension is needed. So that kind of communication seems to have benefited the external process. But I also asked, how has the portal affected the overall relationship between public and agency? Because this gets at the idea, the increased transparency is going to increase trust, empathy, and the overall relationship, which has been part of the marketing, in particular for Next Request. And this is where it slightly changes. You still see overall an improvement in the relationship in the minds of the agency employees responding to this survey. 66% reporting vast improvement or somewhat of an improvement, but you see a shift. It's not exactly correlative with the reported improvement in process. And that's for a number of reasons. One is, of course, it's hard to gauge the relationship. You're at the agency doing your job and you're not necessarily communicating with members of the public and hearing what they think of the process. Also, in some cases, the public isn't aware of a service like this necessarily. Agencies still have to accept requests through email, phone. Somebody wrote on the survey, even if it's painted on a rock, we have to accept it. So people don't necessarily know they have this at their fingertips. Also, heightened expectations. When you have a system that has made data collection so easy and has sped up the process, which agencies reported it did, then you might have requesters who have higher expectations in terms of speed and delivery of service. And some agencies reported struggling with that. And then we can't ignore the issue of the digital divide, technology challenges. Some agencies reported that requesters were unhappy with having to use an electronic system, or when they did use it, they found some bugs in the system, or they didn't quite know how it worked, so they were frustrated by that. So, and then others reported they didn't like having to register to have an account and provide information because some requests can be anonymous, and they weren't crazy about some of the requirements of the system. So these were provided by the agencies as reasons for maybe not having the same impact on relationship as on the process. But you can see overall, agencies are reporting great satisfaction. Even the challenges that come with having these portals don't outweigh the benefits that they have reaped. And just a reminder, this is from the agency perspective, not from the requester perspective.
Thanks, Alexa. Will, so you are the co-founder and CEO of one of these major companies. Tell us a little bit about the work that GovQA does, your philosophy in designing portals, and how you see them functioning.
Sure. So, as the online portals go just nationwide, we sell at the state level, the county level, the city level, the special district level. So we're very familiar with all the different challenges because there's actually unique challenges, right? So the group here is very familiar with FOI in general, okay? But people that use these portals is the general public, okay? Reporters, right? There's a lot of commercial use, right? Okay, as well, okay? Plus legal attorneys, right? They're looking for things to help them for, am I going to court? Do I need a subpoena? Things along those lines, okay? So there actually is a challenge overall to basically make sure that all those people can effectively use any online portal that's provided, okay? We actually have some background because we do some other CRM and 301 systems, and what we've learned there is that the normal person has no idea how their government actually works. They really don't know how the city works. What's the difference between a public works? What's the difference between this, right? And so basically trying to find one portal that can satisfy the general public of, hey, I'm not sure what department owns this record, right? I heard about something in the news. I wanted to find out more, so I came to the site and I wanted to make a public records request. I'm not sure who owns that, right? Reporters and things like that know exactly where to go, right? Okay, so it's a little bit different function, and having one portal to service all that is a challenge, but we're able to do that through basically breaking things up. So that's why you see, like for Dallas and other people, there's things that are very unique to public records for police, right? What specifically are you looking for? Because those have different expectations. If you're looking for a background check or something else, a police report, different expectations, right? As far as the portals go, there's also things that we do around deflection. Alexa said that some people don't actually push previous made requests out because they're hesitant unfortunately, they're very hesitant as to what is that going to mean? Is that going to mean I'm going to get more requests, right? Every time I go push out information, does that make people more inquisitive? What I tell people is, at least from my experience, most people don't sit around going to city websites and scouring them all day long looking for things on the weekends, right, to go and actually make more requests. Typically there's an event or something else that happens. So we actually provide some other tool sets that are proactive in nature, okay, for events that occur where you know that you're gonna have both reporters, other interested parties, the general public, wanting to getting those records right away, okay? And we call those proactive pages, and Cleveland uses those, Waco, Texas here uses those. And what they are is as soon as an event happens, even if it's like something for the police, unfortunately there's a shooting or something, everyone knows that everyone's going to ask for information. But we can only release these 3 things under the law, right now, whatever it is. So they create a page, they put some description, they actually put the documents up there, and the beauty of that is that they can subscribe and follow the page. Okay, so you'll get a text message anytime Cleveland uploads another document. You don't need to make requests, because as soon as we release information, you'll be the first to know, right? You'll get an email or text message. And we use that along with other previously made requests and things like that in our deflection. So when people are actually making a request, as they're actually typing, we try to keep this whole proactive concept going, right? So as they're typing, we can actually go and say, hey, you put the word budget, here's the whole budget page on the website, right? Did you check that? Did you do that? Here's some previously made requests. One thing that's unique for us that we do, I think a lot of clients like, is when you publish a request, and you don't have to, you can publish a request, but you can only publish maybe 2 documents out of the 5 documents you released, okay? The ones that you think are gonna be very more focused to the general public, all right? We also do incorporate open data portals, right? Because that's also part of transparency, right? Because a lot of these data sets have the information that people are looking for. They just don't necessarily always know and are a little scared of this whole open data because they see data sets and it looks more complicated and you have to download information, right? But we'll also deflect to there saying, hey, you're looking for police information. It's contained in this data set. All the crime information you're looking for is over here, okay? Right? And after all that's going on, even if they're still making requests, what we've actually seen, because we have some reporting, is that people actually sometimes make a more narrow request. And that helps people like Jerry, right? That are actually working the public requests, because now rather than getting this very large request of, I'm an upset person, I just want this, that, the other thing, now they actually maybe take some time, they read and understand a little bit more, and they make a more narrow request, which actually really does impact. For our larger customers, cities, 250,000 and above, duplicates is a huge problem, okay, right? So actually being able to do any of this deflection on the front end, we also have deflection on the back end to group things so they work them together, right? And this way everyone gets a consistent answer is a big portion of that. But as far as the portals go, the portals, you can make them as configurable as you want, but remember, a lot of times you're dealing with people that maybe this is the first time and they just don't understand, 1, how the city works, and 2, what they're asking. Does that make sense? So.
Yeah. Great, thank you. So, Jerry, tell us about Dallas's public records portal. Tell us about why did Dallas decide to adopt it? How has it been going? What do you see on the government side?
Initially, when I started working with the public records requests, I was the only person handling open records requests for the city of Dallas. I was the only person that was actually processing open records requests. The process was kind of centralized, but if you can imagine, this was back in 2008, it was just me and we were using a different system. So of course that came with its group of challenges. We switched over to WebQA in 2016, and I can honestly tell you, it's saved our lives. And actually when we decided to switch over, we used the media as our test subjects, and we asked them to assist us with the process to see how it actually was going. Did it work? What do you think? So we didn't shy away from them. We actually encouraged them to give us their honest feedback, and that really did help. So of course, as Will said, we used the portal. Here in the city of Dallas, we're divided into 2 parts. The city of Dallas, which is under the city secretary's office. We process requests for every city department except for the police department. They have their own separate open records unit, but as you can imagine, we have to work together. We get hundreds and hundreds of requests here in the city of Dallas, and we try our best to put most of the requests on our portal. If you log on to the city's main website, for those who are not very familiar with the computer or using the internet, on our home site, there's actually a tab that says Open Records Request. You don't have to do a lot of clicks because we found that, like myself, I don't like doing a lot of clicking to find information. So it's very simple to find it. And the portal, again, we not only publish the requests, we also publish the information that we're releasing. And that has helped us out tremendously. Another thing I wanted to add is we get very few complaints of individuals who don't like the portal. We cannot force them to use the portal. However, we do still have paper. We do still mail requests, and of course we still receive requests by fax. But by far, starting out with one individual processing requests, I tell everybody every day I love my city job. I find it rewarding and challenging because now it makes our life a whole lot easier. As much information as we in the city can push out in advance or try to get it out there, we do it in an effort to be more transparent. There are a lot of things we would like to do. Of course, we're bound by laws and exceptions and all these big words that they want you to use with the law. However, every day we're learning and we're trying to improve that process and just make it more transparent. But the portal, coming from someone who 10 years ago was by herself, is the best thing that's happened to me.
That's great. Jerry, I want to, I'm sorry, not Jerry, Will, I want to ask you, what types of tools does GovQA have in terms of providing data to both government and to the public about how public records requests are going kind of writ large? Like what kind of reporting tools are there or tools for providing data about kind of the health of the FOI ecosystem?
Sure. So everything that actually is done, so by done by someone, I mean like Jerry's department, right? That could actually be a data set that feeds an open data portal or something else along those lines. You know, in terms of what actually happens in the day-to-day, there's lots of things that are tracked and managed, what activities, what's happening. You know, we try to take a very comprehensive approach, and that's mostly because we do public records, but we also do things like subpoenas and everything else along those lines, all those different types of legal requests. So we're actually, able to provide a holistic picture of what happened, what was asked, does this look the same as something else, right? So here's all the things that came in under this topic this year, under this topic, what's going on here. We group also things, like I said, they're not just public records requests. So we could say, you got this many public records requests, but you also had, then that translated to subpoenas for that, or that translated to a legal hold, or something else along those lines, specific to the city. One of the other things that, also the city is always interested in is how much are we releasing and how much are we withholding, right? And we make a big differentiation between that. So it's not just a request came in and it got denied. Typically a request comes in and it's broken into different pieces, right? In a larger entity, like a large state department, they get very large requests, tons of documents. So it goes to this district and it goes to this district, it goes to this sub area, right? And so they're working their each individual components, but they're either saying I can't release this, or I'm denying this portion under this portion of the law, right? This exemption, I have this subset of 10,000 documents, but we keep track of these 7,000 were because of these exemptions, this here, this, that, right? And that kind of gets back to the whole concept of relationship with the requester, right? Because some of the complaints might be around not necessarily the access, but I just don't like the process, right? Because they don't understand. I don't understand why you're not giving me that information. Unfortunately, under state law, I can't, right? I mean, whether it's something in the police department or whatever, or why did this get redacted? Okay, so when redaction's done in the system, we track every redaction reason, every exemption code. It's on there with all the statutes and everything. But that whole subset of data, from a comprehensive standpoint, is something that we can provide. We can push out the open data portals. We provide it to customers, things like that.
That's great. Alexa, I have a question for you. One of the interesting things that I noticed in your paper, and you mentioned it, was that a lot of governmental entities that have these public records portals choose not to put the results up And I think one of the kind of promises of technology, right, one of the promises of these portals is that, that it will increase the kind of some knowledge in a democracy, right? I don't have to make a request. This is always up there. I can build off of the fruits of people who have come before me. What do we know about the reluctance behind some of these government entities to put up the documents?
Oh, thanks. I think it comes down to the technology outpacing policy, which is what we see again and again in all facets of civic life. And there are a couple cautionary tales, including Evanston, Illinois, where the city clerk adopted Next Request and made all of the requests and responsive documents public. And the name of a sexual assault victim was accidentally published in one of those police records that was posted. The name had been redacted in all areas except one. One got through. And the city council there, basically aldermen, I think, they were outraged when this happened and held meetings, public meetings, to discuss whether to shut down the portal. And ultimately, they did opt to make all of the responsive documents private now, only delivered to the requester and no longer part of a living archive. And I think that kind of represents the fear that agencies have. So even if we do our best to vet the information, to redact what needs to be redacted, something still might get through. And if we publish it to the world, we might have greater liability. So that was a concern that agencies had that really the majority in my research said we aren't doing this, but a small number said we're considering it, we're talking about it, we just need to figure out the policies around it. They need to do it with thought and care because of the dangers that could happen.
I don't know if I could say real quick. I mean, so what we've seen in the past is a lot of people that maybe have an inefficient process, which is I think what Alexa was alluding to, before they implement something else, are very hesitant to basically go and put out a public portal or push information out there until they get their kind of own house in order, right? So, you'll see a lot of, backlogs, and unfortunately you have different state laws, and based on the state law, things happen, and some places, we don't, unfortunately they can wait forever to release the records, right? So backlogs go up. And this is back to the concept of now I have on my portal, now I actually have a date, I can see how long it's taken, right, for someone to be responsive, right? And so until they actually get that back house in order, right, and put their policies and procedures in place, they don't want to put the portal. We also do have people that kind of baby step into the portal as well, maybe even where they're actually pushing out information, like I said, proactively first, and then they're taking requests after the fact. Things like that, or they're taking police things that are very specific with that. But that gets kind of back to my main concept of, the relationship with the requester is a delicate balance, okay, right? Because the things do get redacted. Redaction's a huge issue. Many states also, what's redacted is depending on who's requesting it, right? In Texas here, if you're the victim of that accident report, you don't have to redact anything, right? But otherwise, that has to be redacted for everyone else. So you have this mix of unredacted information, redacted information, which gets to this whole security and PII, which is a big conversation that we have with people all the time. So I mean, even from us, just so people realize, we can't see documents that our customers upload, specifically for PII purposes. So if they call support or something, I can't see the document, I can't help you, you have to explain it to me. Right, and that is a huge, a huge thing today, because they're used to paper, and I have a paper folder. It's in a locked cabinet. No one gets to see it, especially public records as when you start breaking out into things that are very, very sensitive. California has a new law, around turning over police use of force investigation information, things along those lines. Everything in there is PII. Okay. Right, so only certain people, even on the back end, are actually allowed to see that. So you have security; those things are walled off. Once it's released, only 2 people can see it. Those different types of things. So it is a big concern, and we've even looked at how do I interpret PII information on documents ahead of time. There's different ways of doing that. Unfortunately, there's no catch-all, right? Okay, there's no guarantee. We can make suggestions that this document has personal information in it. You should look at it, even though you've not redacted it, you should look at it before you even release it anyway, but there's no guarantees.
Jerry, I have a question for you, which is, I work with reporters, obviously, a lot, and well, I guess almost exclusively. And, reporters are a skeptical bunch. And I can't even tell you how many logins I have for various public records portals. Federal level, I've got, 2 or 3. States, I have them all over the place. That's on top of my court logins. I was really interested to hear you say that you decided to reach out to the news media community specifically when you were developing your portal. What have you seen in terms of people willing to use the portal versus still wanting to fax or mail their requests or email their requests or send them on a coconut? What is the breakdown in the news media in terms of the adoption of the portal here in Dallas?
We may receive, so let me just say this. We get requests by fax, still by fax, very rarely even by email nowadays. We use the WebQA system to track the requests. However, we don't force individuals to use it. But the way I explain it is you don't have to pay to park, come to City Hall, fill out a piece of paper. You're not going to get it the same day. So you might as well submit the request online. I can honestly say we don't have an issue with people in pushback, even from the media. They actually loved it. Again, they actually get their information quicker, if you can imagine. Because we publish a lot of our requests, they can sneak and see what other reporters are reporting. And they don't have to make a request. They can simply wait for us to put that information on the portal, and here you go. I know there are some agencies that kind of wait before they publish to give other media outlets an advantage. But we don't do that. Believe it or not, we actually have a good relationship, and it's working. The portal is working. If they have any questions, they still give us a call, but I cannot tell you that we've received any complaints. We do still, as you mentioned, we have the ones that want to submit the request on a rock. And in that instance, we don't require that they fill out the form. We don't even require that they leave their name. However, we do still fulfill the request. We document that the request is fulfilled, and we actually just place it to the side. We do still have a section of the elderly population, but again, they're quite savvy. My mom is on all of the social media outlets herself, and they're okay with it. You don't have to change your password a bunch of times or remember those things. However, because we have full access to the system, if you can't remember your password, we just click a button. And if you still just can't get it, if it's too difficult for you to get to the portal, we just email you the documents so we can simply put them in the mail. The purpose is not for us to make you not want to submit requests. We get you the information. It's just the portal has improved our lives. However, we have those people that are just stuck. And we have accommodations for those people that are stuck.
That's great. I'm constantly frustrated at the federal experience. There's a lot of agencies that use this portal called FOI Online that locks you out every 30 days, and you have to change your password, but you can't just change it online. You have to call a call center, and it just makes the whole process incredibly frustrating. And a lot of agencies, especially at the federal level, are locking requesters only into the use of online portals. So I'm really encouraged to hear that you all still accept requests however they come in. Yeah.
One of the other things for adoption for us is very similar to what Jerry was just talking about. We have our customers do a proactive approach. We tell them, here's some materials. Reach out to all the newspapers ahead of time. This is going to be the new process. Reach out to all those big law firms in town that you send you public records requests. Tell them, hey, if you want your stuff faster, this is how you want it. What you want to do. You want to use the public portal, right? This is how we're going. On the flip side of that, as Jerry also mentioned, we have some large jurisdictions where they have lots of walk-ins. Okay, Miami-Dade County has lines of walk-ins around public records. We actually kind of organize them so they can actually reserve little time slots to come. But basically, they do the same thing. It's not a kiosk, but they're like, hey, here's our system. Flip the monitor around, enter your stuff here. We'll help you, right? Because next time you can just do it yourself, right? Or they'll help them, but they're looking for immediate things. Okay. One of the other benefits as well that we didn't talk about yet for the public portal is lots of states realize now how much effort people like Jerry's team put in, right? There's a whole process around cost recovery of creating and recovering costs for these types of records, okay, right? If you want 100,000 pages of something, whether it's electronic or not, it might take someone at the city a whole week, right, to go through that and create that to be released. So as more states come around with laws around cost recovery and what you can charge, the portal becomes, necessary because then you want to pay online, all right? If you have, like Washington, you have installments. Here in Texas, you have deposits, okay? There's really no better way of doing that than by an online portal, all right? So, you say, okay, pay your $1,000, here's your 1,000 records. Pay another $1,000, here's your next 1,000 records, okay? And that's another reason of just driving everyone here, because you don't want walk-ins and checks and whatnot. I know newspapers, and things like that, they want to pay on a monthly basis. We get sent a bill every month. This is what you owe for Chicago Tribune. Here you go, pay it. Same thing with the law firms. Okay, so
Great. Quick show of hands, how many people here have submitted a records request via an online portal, either at the state or local or federal level? Okay, most people. How many people were totally satisfied with their experience? Not because of what the agency did, but based on that's not going to go over well here. But how many people were totally satisfied with the process? Okay, a couple. How many people found it to be better than other ways of submitting it, either through email or through fax or paper? Okay, so some more people. Okay. Just wanted to know. We have a couple minutes for either questions or thoughts from the room, so I want to make sure that we had a chance to hear from you all. We've got mics that will go around. Questions either for the panel or observations? Yeah.
I had one for the City of Dallas. What kind of a timeline from response to publishing a decision? Is there a city ordinance or a state statute that requires a response within an X number of days?
Here in the great state of Texas, let me just say that. The Texas Public Information Act says we have 10 business days to provide a response. That doesn't necessarily mean we will have the information to you within 10 business days. However, we will respond within 10 business days.
And during that time, is the request publicly available?
So when I said that we put the requests online, honestly, there are about 99% of the requests are there. There are certain requests, as Will mentioned, that can't be published, but if it's available to be published, absolutely. It's there. You can see, before we provide the information, immediately upon input into our system, it's immediately made available online.
Last question, what about data miners?
The what?
Data miners, people that want volumes and volumes and volumes of information, maybe on a weekly basis?
Well, so we don't have to deal requests that happen in the future. So we educate them on the fact that the Public Information Act only applies to information that's in existence at the time of the request. So we have those people that every Monday submit a request for information that occurred the week prior. So we just deal with it like that.
like purchase orders, things like that?
Yeah, so we get a lot of requests for things like people want tickets, citations, so they can do for defensive driving classes and to sell houses. So they want a list of all the structures that were burned, and those are weekly reports, and they just ask for those documents once a week.
So I'm not sure who this is for, but in cases where a custodian is creating an online archive of records that have been provided in response to requests, are some subsequent requesters being told not here's your records, but hey, we already gave them to this guy, why don't you look here? Is that how it's done?
That's part of the deflection. So basically, before this request is submitted, you still can submit your request. It's basically showing in a right-hand pop-up and things like that. Here's other things you might want to look at. They can look at the documents, still come back to their request. They can look at other things like data portals and stuff like that. Anything that we find that matches, we're going to say, potentially your request is already fulfilled here. But it's very loose, right? So we're not really driving them away from the request. They're still basically on their request screen. They can ignore all of that, close it, and just click submit.
And then in the event that the deflection didn't work, and we receive a request for the exact same thing, so we cheat. So we could actually go to the previous request, because we can only suggest an internet site. The law says we can offer them the site, but they can still say, no, I want you to provide it for me. So we just simply copy it from request A over to request B, and we respond to the requester.
I have a question about the cost to a government agency to use one of these vendors like GovQA or NextRequest. What typically is the cost, and is this something that's accessible to, say, a smaller state or to smaller agencies?
Obviously the cost varies based on the type of agency and volumes. But as this group knows, just because you have a small number of requests does not mean that they are not deep, complicated, complex requests, lots of documents, right? Who, what, when, where, right? Doing discovery and things along those lines. So, I mean, that comes into play. I mean, smaller entities, they're paying, a few $1,000s if you're very small. If larger entities could pay, several $100,000, depending on what's going on. So, I'll give you an example. We have customers that do hundreds of thousands of public records requests a year. We have customers that do 100, right? And so that's going to range. But once again, it's based on complexity, who, what, when, where, and then what else they're doing, what else we might be integrated with. Jerry mentioned how we do the duplicate deflection, even if something comes through and says, hey, this looks like this subpoena over here, you already released it over here, just redact it and release it under public records, or this looks like another public records request. That kind of all comes into play. But there's solutions for everyone. It doesn't matter on size. To answer your question.
Alexa, did you have data on this? Oh, can we borrow the mic? Sorry.
Here you go, Alexa.
Hi. So I thought Will could best answer for GovQA. I can tell you for NextRequest, when they launched, the range was around $2,000 to $50,000 per year, depending on the size of the agency and the number of requests. And as Will said, it's very customized and it changes, but right now, it ranges like the Rhode Island Office of the General Treasurer, which doesn't receive many requests. They're quoted $3,000 a year. San Diego, which receives thousands of requests per year, $28,000 per year. State of Iowa, $78,000 per year. So
Is that for the whole state?
Yeah, the state. So the state is a client. So it really depends. But they also offer a service, a free service. You just go to their website. If you're a very small agency receiving fewer than like 10 requests a month, you can try out the interface for free.
I had a follow-up question on the cost to invite someone asked that. I was curious what the annual cost was, and I was curious how small a volume is useful. But I want to ask a little bit about the cost recovery of the online portals. Is that worked into the cost? In some states, you have to pay, cost recovery of providing public records request. Is there any fee to the requester, either a percentage or to pay to use the portal, or is it in any other way worked into the fees that the requester has to pay?
Well, I mean, overall, for us, I can speak to us, there is no convenience fee or anything else that we layer on to actually do and take the charge and take the payment. There's a small fee to just connect with the city's payment provider, but there's nothing that says you have to pay to do this. Now, that being said, background, certain crash reports and things like that in states that are handled under public records, they do charge a straight up fee. They'll charge $12, but they've been doing that forever in that state statute. So you can be, okay, I charge $12, $16. In California, I think someone charges $23 for a crash report. So those are usually flat charges, but there's no convenience fee, at least from our perspective.
So we, here in the city of Dallas, no, we don't pass any of those fees along to the requester. Any fee that is collected, it all goes into the general fund. And I can tell you firsthand, it's not a revenue source for the city of Dallas, especially because technology, most things are digital. We can't charge you if there's something digital and you're just pushing a button and transferring the documents from here to here, then there's no charge. So again, we're not, by no means as the city of Dallas making money processing open records requests.
Oh, yes, sorry.
And real quick, I asked about costs in the survey, and 4 out of 5 said that they did track the costs to compare. And most of them said that the costs overall were about the same when they compared how much they were spending before the portal versus paying for the portal. Only a very small fraction, 5 agencies out of the 54, said that costs had increased with the portal.
All right. And just to answer your question a little bit more about cost recovery, lots of people, even if they're not charging, we have large jurisdictions that have chosen to not charge for just political reasons or something else, but they all track internally, right? And that's back to each department wants to get credit for the time that they're helping around public records, right? So this way, when people, hey, why do you need 5 staff members over here? Well, guess what? Because 1.5 of them are focused on public records, right? People don't necessarily realize that all the time, when especially these larger jurisdictions, how much time is being spent, or an individual lawsuits comes down or something else, right? And so I'll just go back to California, the SB 1421 law around forced use investigations. I know someone there, they spent $32,000 just getting all the documents together as an internal cost, right? So they're like, we have to be able to recover this, so.
This is mainly for William, but I imagine the others could address it too. I'm curious how many agencies have part of their portal devoted to this is our state's open records law, and here's what it says, and here's what you can ask for, and how you can do it. And I'm asking because I live in a rural area, and I've experienced small agencies that try to make the public believe that they have to jump through the city's hoops to get records. And I'm just wondering how much transparency there is on the portals about what the law actually is in that state.
Sure, that's actually an excellent question. It kind of goes back to one of the earlier questions, but for us, basically, most customers actually will put, here's the public records law, a snippet on the top, what they can and what they can't get. It kind of just gets back to adoption. So usually we're pretty, our customers are pretty transparent with that. We have all the FAQs about what they can get. Some people even will let them select something and say, hey, by the way, that's part of the deflection. That is not something you can request under the public records law, right? So if they start typing, we'll actually say, this statute says you can't do that. To your point though, there are certain jurisdictions that may make it harder to find how to make a public records request. Jerry here, City of Dallas, it's front and center, right? And most people, it's front and center. There are people that sometimes make it under contact us or something else, but I can tell you from personal experience, it's mostly because they don't have the resources. They just don't have the resources. It's not that they're necessarily hiding out, it's really a resource constraint. But for us, we always say, look, here's the law, here's all the links to the law, everything around what you can request, what you can't request, and what we can charge. Does that answer your question?
Hi. I just want to say it sounds like Jerry's portal has gotten really good reviews and you have quite an understanding of the Texas law, and it sounds like it's going well. The issue I wanted to talk about though is Texas law still requires that governmental entities accept written or paper requests, and there's a reason for that because not everybody is on the internet. And one of our recurring themes at the legislature we have to point out when it comes to public notice and access and various things is in Texas, for instance, there still is a real digital divide, and I don't want us to lose sight of that. We have 6 million people, or a quarter of our state, who live in homes without high-speed internet access. So we have to always be mindful of, it's not that sometimes people don't want to get on a portal or do things electronically, they just really can't. And that access, it deals with elderly, rural, lower income, certain populations are disproportionately affected by that. So that's sort of a running theme I have to repeat all the time at the Texas Capitol and remind people of. So I just don't want us to lose sight of that. Not everybody is wired and Wi-Fi connected.
So each city facility has the request forms. You can walk into any city facility and submit a request. The city has things called 311 to go, where we have these mobile vehicles that go around to different recreation centers and different city events. In those places, you can submit requests there. But again, we use GovQA as a tracking system as well. We still take it, we'll mail it. I don't even know how much a stamp is, but we actually still mail documents. We don't want to intimidate or have someone not submit a request because of technology. We understand. I mean, stamps and faxes, that's in my lifetime also. So I definitely understand, but again, we do our best to accommodate requesters and allow them to submit a request however it makes them feel comfortable.
I think we have time for maybe one more question.
The discussion so far is mostly focused on sort of the administration of open records law through using portals. But the description of the program in Adam's introduction talked about metrics and what we can learn from the data and so on. And I wonder if perhaps we can wrap up with a discussion of, what does it tell us? What do you learn from sort of crunching the data from your portal? And especially, I was kind of concerned, Ms. Lawson, about, you say every Monday a request is made for last week's data. That screams for proactive disclosure and not to have a weekly request come in from the same person. So that seems to me that's where the portal could really come in handy, is seeing patterns that allow you to address it and reduce the number of requests. So these are issues that the data should be helpful for.
Yeah. So let's have everyone give maybe a minute. What does the data show? What does the data from the portals show us about how things are working, how things are not working?
It's actually working, and a lot of what this gentleman spoke about is we actually have to get buy-in from the departments. Each city department is the custodian of their own records, so we can only suggest that they provide information that's requested weekly. So that's an ongoing discussion. But again, to wrap up, I can definitely tell you that our errors have gone down. The number of requests has stayed about the same, but we are providing data to requesters quicker and, in my opinion, more efficiently.
Yeah. From my perspective, more than about 90% of all the requests we see across all of our several hundred clients are made through the portal. To your point, we do have clients, I'll actually use Cleveland as another example. They basically said, we have tons of requests for the mayor's calendar. Like tons of requests for the mayor's calendar. They use one of our proactive pages. Every month they publish the mayor's calendar out on one of those pages, okay? To the point that Jerry was making about permits and things like that, some jurisdictions have difficulty balancing the transparency aspect because those tend to be commercial in nature, right? The reason why everyone asks for it every Monday is so that they can make money. I can go send flyers to new homes because they want to build a fence, right? Or I can do something else. And so people, there's a balancing act there of what is the real purpose? Is that for the general public consumption, or is it just for consumption of these few people? So,
could we pass the mic?
Sorry.
So let's wrap it up.
Okay. And what you're describing is part of the marketing for these portals, and they have tools where if you type in the word budget, a window will pop up and say, it looks like you're looking for budget information and direct. And it's up to the user to go there, but the hope is that they will, and that'll cut down on requests. I encourage researchers and journalists, because you're right, this is yielding new data about the process that could be mined. And you can actually, I would encourage you to request information from these jurisdictions about the portals because they can be doing filters and running reports about the actual auditing of the request process. And I think there's a lot of information there to be learned. The Sunlight Foundation already used these portals for some research on open data policies in cities, and it was it was really effective to see how it was used itself for research. So I think we should all be doing that, at least the journalists, the researchers. This is a good opportunity for us to use data to actually look at the PRR process.
Okay. Please join me in thanking our panel.